Little Nightmares 2 is a linear puzzle platformer game set in a dark, unsettling world with aspects of horror and uneasiness throughout the game, creating a deeply atmospheric gameplay experience that, in my opinion, massively surpasses that of its predecessor, Little Nightmares 1. Malformed creatures at every turn, interesting and unique characters, a fantastic story and sinister themes. This is my analysis on the twisted world of Little Nightmares 2. In a horror game, I would say that the number one thing that you have to nail to be effective in its genre is the atmosphere, and Little Nightmares 2 does just that. The art style, although it is cartoonish in nature, has an aspect of hyperrealism. The blend of these two art styles is a great way the developers gets the player to be immersed and on edge, as it creates a sense of innocence through the cartoonish style, yet is contrasted by the dark themes and intensity that is captured by the hyper-realism. The contrast plays with your emotions a little bit, and gives a sort of child's perspective on the world, and because we are actually playing as a child, it captures how Mono is perceiving his environment. Although the game is technically a side-scroller, because of the way the camera is set up, the game has huge depth, as the backgrounds from the forest to the long streets of the Pale City makes it seem like there is an infinite space in that environment. But the fact that we as the player are forced by the game's mechanics to mainly go from left to right evokes a sense of imprisonment, like we are trapped and doomed only to go in one direction, despite the scope of the areas we traverse. The lighting, all throughout the game, is phenomenal, and really is what makes up the bulk of the atmosphere, and the vibes the developers want this world to present to you. Of course, in the moments when you're encountering one of these just awful creatures, the lighting is dark, and you can't see anything, and you can probably see how that makes a good horror environment without me explaining it. It's scary, you don't know what's next, you literally can't see your environment around you, evoking a sense of fear and emergency. However, the lighting that I'm talking about that is used extremely well in this game, as opposed to its predecessor, is the ambient lighting. Just take in these scenes and you'll see what I mean. Not only does it make it look incredible, but it sets the tone for the entire game. It's not entirely dark, which doesn't make the game look too depressing, but it gives you some hope, you know? Graphically, this game isn't that different from the original Little Nightmares in 2017, in terms of textures and all that, but it's massively improved on its lighting, and it makes the whole game just look way more pretty, I guess, and it just makes it a lot more enjoyable to play, cinematically.
I saw Blackblade's video on Little Nightmares, which you should check out by the way, and he described the atmosphere feeling like the manifestation of the screen painting by Edvard Munch, which I think captured the vibe of this world perfectly. Or another way it could be referenced to is the story title, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Harlan Ellison. I think that these are perfect parallels to compare the atmosphere to, as both the screen painting and the quote convey the feeling of being trapped and having no way to free yourself, being in a constant loop of agony and pain and misery, which is 100% the way I interpret the world of Little Nightmares, as well as both Mono and Six being in a time loop themselves. The soundtrack to the game plays a crucial role in building the game's atmosphere and creating a horror environment, building tension through its ambient noises and sound effects, reinforcing the disturbing nature of the game's locations, from chase sequences with intense and suspenseful music to the more heartfelt moments. I find the best games are the ones with great and memorable soundtracks with them.
Both games in the Little Nightmares series capture the fear factor extremely well. However, this game simply achieves this much more effectively. Like the developers took all the best aspects from the first game and amplified them in the second to make a much more immersive and terror-inducing experience. One way I found that this is achieved that I haven't seen many people in the community talk about is that compared to the original game, this particular area of the world we find ourselves in seems a lot more lived in, more built up, yet somehow seems more dead, empty and lonely compared to what we see in the moor from Little Nightmares 1. Mono and Six walk through empty streets, deserted buildings. The only other children we see are made of porcelain. Are they even alive? Are we the only non-corrupted living things in this entire city? These are some of the questions I personally was asking myself on my first playthrough, and you may have too. Although we have our friend accompanying us throughout the game, it feels a lot more alone and abysmal compared to the moor, which evokes powerful emotions like dread and uneasiness, which enhances the main theme of this game, which is escapism, and helps us understand the character a lot better, because you both just want to get out of this horrible city. Little Nightmares 2 is short but sweet. It doesn't try to overload you with content like other games out there. It has a clear and precise goal it wants to achieve, which is to immerse the player, make them feel trapped in this world, and make them feel uncomfortable, much like me whenever I speak to a woman. Like many of my favourite video games, Little Nightmares 2 seems like a passion project. Like the developers really cared about this game, and put lots of thought into how they wanted to portray the world, the characters and their journey. It generates its horror through its compelling atmosphere, and doesn't try to get you with cheap jump scares the entire 5.5 hours of gameplay. But when it does it in an extremely impactful way. Little Nightmares 2 is a very underrated horror game, and although it is relatively new, it's still slept on a bit, and I encourage those who haven't played it to give it a go, as it's quite short but an absolutely fantastic game.
That's all I have to say about this game for today, so thank you for making it this far into the video, and let me know if there's any games you want me to talk about in the comments, and if you enjoyed, consider subscribing and leaving a like. Thanks.